see all of the attributes of the node. So C3PO, skin color is gold, height is 167, I assume this is centimeters. All this stuff, so you can see all the data for these things. So that's pretty cool. If I took a particular node and return a couple, take C3PO, double click on it, we see all the relationships for that node. And so you can see,
Nice.
yeah.
That's good.
So you can see all of the movies that C3PO was in, which is this is actually this data was imported before the movies. I don't even think this has been updated since the movies came out. The new movie came out. So, but you can see this is the film's relationship, and these are also these aren't necessarily the relationship names I would have chosen. They just this is the key that was in the JSON from there, and I was just importing it without too much concern for what it was, and so that's how it got generated. But so yeah, so here films, so you can see C3PO was in Empire Strikes Back, and actually if I scroll over these, you can see these don't have any relationships. You can see there's an identifier for each of these relationships, but there's no properties. See that the species is droid. Why droid is films, Empire Strikes Back, that's a little strange. Yeah, so that's kind of cool. And let's actually, now if we want to say person return p.name, we do that, and that's going to give us a table. P.skin color, right? So that's just going to return us the data from all those people. But actually what you can see here is that if I return just p, it does this graph visualization, but if I go into the rows, what it's actually doing is it's returning these objects that have all this data on them. But because I'm in the web interface, it recognizes that these objects are being returned and automatically visualizes them for me, because that's kind of handy. Well, you can also play around here if you want, like person, you can change the color of the person node to the size, things like that. So that's kind of handy. So great, we have these things that we're returning. So let's get a little more complicated. I have some stored queries here. So for example, we wanted to get for all of the different homeworlds, we wanted to find out how many characters of each species had that homeworld as their homeworld. We'd get a planet, and we'd say, okay, find a person that has that planet as their homeworld. And then you also notice that there's an arrow here. So that arrow can go either direction, it can go left or it can go right. Or if you don't specify the arrow, then you don't care about the direction of that relationship. So if you have like, person likes this other person, this person, if you have a sort of a social network of who likes who, you might not necessarily care about the direction in that case, but sometimes you do. So anyway, so we find homeworlds and the people that have that planet as their homeworld, and then the species of of each of those people. And so this is kind of like a join across, or just a simple linear path. And then we return all of those planets. We return the name of the species, and we return the count of the people. So we're sort of joining between planet and species, and in the middle we're counting the things in between. And then we can order by that count. And there we go. And so one of the things it's kind of a small thing, but I really like it about Neo4j, is that you don't have to do a group by in Neo4j. It just sees that you're doing an aggregation, like a count or a sum or a collect or whatever. And then you can, it'll group by the other columns that aren't aggregations. So if I did this, if I just said count the number of people that are on planets, then it's like, okay, there's 5 people from Naboo, there's 2 people from Camino, on and on. And you can also, if you didn't want the count, but if you actually wanted the list of those people, you could say collect person, collect? Oh, right, because count person isn't there anymore. So collect person, so now you actually have the name of the planet, the name of the species, and all of the people that have that home world and that species. That's handy. But then if that's a little too much, you can say collect person, that name, like that. And now you have a list of names, which is handy. Or if you wanted to, you could say name, skin color, person dot skin color. So collect is pretty smart because it can evaluate this thing inside of it over and over again. Give you an array of those things. Yeah, so there's an example of an array of 2 objects. That make sense?
Yeah.
Great. So let's look at just one other query. We can get another queries if we want. Yeah, so there's this is another query that I sort of wrote ahead of time. That take all the films and find all the people that are in those films as a character and the species of those characters. And now we say, okay, now we only want droids. So our species is a droid. Now we're going to return the title of the film and the people with a collect, like I was doing before. And so now we see in this film, these are the droids. In this film, these are the droids. So that makes sense. And so I'm trying to think of an example of. Let me try to just do something on the fly here, where if we say match person, we see all of the things that are connected to a person. What I'm going to actually do, I'm going to say, give me all the persons, and say with P, limit 1. So here what I'm doing is using the with clause, which is something in Cypher that lets you take the result from one particular part of your query and pass it on to another part of your query. It's sort of like a pipe in Unix or pipe in a lot of things. And so we only want to get one person, and now that we have that one person, we want to get all of the nodes that are related to that person. And we can say return everything. What was wrong with that? Oh, match. Match B. There we go. Get the graph result for that. So Luke Skywalker is the person that we got, I think. Oh, hates this. This is just a node that I created randomly. And so people have a homeworld, they have films, and they're pilots of vehicles. I think that's what I was looking for. So I go back up to this thing and I say, okay, but also person pilots, vehicle pilots. That relationship I think is kind of backwards, but pilots. And then we're droid. We can see if there's any vehicles that are piloted. Does this have a name? Yeah, name. So p.name, p.name. Let's see if we get anything. No, we don't. But if we do, let's say human, we'll get something. Yeah. So we have Doku as the speeder. I don't know why we didn't get Luke Skywalker. Luke Skywalker's human. So this is an example of a subgraph where you have essentially sort of a node in the middle, a person, and you care about the films that he's in, or he or she's in, the species of that person, and the vehicles. And so you sort of the subgraph is not just a linear subgraph like the ones I've been showing so far, but it's something a little more complex. So, anybody want to see anything else, or we sort of get the idea?
Can we rename the columns?
The properties, yeah. Yeah, so let's say we wanted to, let's just say create, I'll show you how you can create nodes too. So create, I'm just going to create, it has nothing to do with Star Wars, but I'm just going to put it in here. Create product, set p.name equals widget. So let's say I have this product. And now I would say, okay, I actually want, instead of name, I want it to be title or something. So I can say match product set p.title equals p.name, remove p.name. And then match product return name p.title. Yeah, so now we have the title, not the name.
Sorry, I mean we change the title, the column name, while we have a query.
And we change the results.
The results. Oh, yes, of course. I see what you're saying. An alias of sorts. Yeah. So if we wanted to, if we wanted this array here, for example, right now the name of this is kind of just what it is. We can say as names and So
I think Neo4j very good with I mean Neo4j very good with we want to start with something and open the graph, you know. It mean I mean we should use Neo4j for store relationship and if I want to search document, search comment of the book or something like that, and we should use Neo4j for that case. I mean,
yeah.
Neo4j very good with the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So we start with node and go to other node. Neo4j is very good with that. So I think which are explained with Neo4j. So what about the full text search?
Full text search, right?
We should use Neo4j for that case, or we should store the document to other database, and Neo4j only store relationship.
Right. That's a good question. So there's a few things that you can do. So Neo4j has this concept of legacy indexes, which are these indexes that sort of originally came with the database. They've been working on these new indexes, but they're not as powerful. Like I was talking about, like if I search for this, you know, I can say it was this on the species name. So I can say create index on species name. So the thing about this isn't an exact index. So that's not as powerful. That's not gonna give you full text search. So there are these Neo4j legacy indexes. There's some documentation on it that I would suggest checking out. That gives you some more power. Neo4j comes bundled with Lucene, which, if you're not familiar with that, Lucene is a Java library for indexing and searching of data. And so it has that built in, and you can use that. It's a little more difficult, but you can use it. One of the things so there's that. But one of the things I also often recommend is using Elasticsearch. Yeah, and there's Neo4j Elasticsearch. There's a plugin. And actually, I should also explain, Neo4j has this concept of these things called unmanaged extensions. And also it has plugins, but so you can make plugins for the Neo4j server, or for the Neo4j server, I think. And so this plugin, I think, just goes in, and what it does is anytime that you update data in Neo4j, it'll update Elasticsearch for you automatically. So that's handy. I've also in Ruby, there's a gem called SearchKick that I sometimes recommend to people, which, you know, when you make changes through Ruby, it'll update Elasticsearch and it'll do your searches through Elasticsearch. So there's that, and that's pretty good. But sometimes also people will definitely build a hybrid. You know, they might have Postgres or MySQL on one side to do particular kinds of querying, and then Neo4j on the other side. It kind of depends on your use case, and you have to kind of feel it out. But yeah.
So we can write a plugin for Neo4j.
Yeah. Well, yeah, totally. Because it's written in Java, and actually, so if you're using, you know, if you're writing a Java application, you can use Neo4j just within your thing. And actually, I should explain, you don't have to use Cypher to connect to Neo4j. They have a whole Java API, and so if you're using Java, you can do these things where you can get nodes and you can do the traversals yourself, and that can be very, very quick. Because when you do Cypher, it's more declarative, and you're saying, this is kind of what I'm looking for, can you give it back to me? Whereas in Java, you could say, okay, go to that, okay, now we have that, go to here, you know, and that can be very, very quick. So that's the sort of trade-off. But you can build these things, so I don't think this is an unmanaged extension. but it's a kernel extension, right? But there are these things called unmanaged extensions where you can write some Java code, or maybe Java compatible code, I'm not as clear on that, and you put that as a plugin into Neo4j, and then that will allow you to expose an HTTP endpoint onto the Neo4j server. And so if you have some computations that are very intense, some graph computations that are very intense, and sometimes there's also some things you just can't do in Cypher. Like you can do a lot in Cypher, especially if you really sort of work on it, but like there's some recursive queries you can't do, and some just very intensive browsing, things, A-star searches and things like that you'd want to implement in Java, and then you might send to your endpoint, say like, okay, give me the results for this ID with these parameters or whatever, and then it would return you those results. So that's another way to go about it.
Any book or document about writing plugin for Neo4j?
I think so. Yeah, I think we try to have pretty good documentation for that. So unmanaged extensions. There's Neo4j manual, and it has a section on unmanaged extensions. And I think there's even an example repository somewhere that has sort of some example code that you can, like template code that you can start with. But here's some, how you might start. What else? Any other questions?
I have questions. If I want to using Neo4j in legacy applications, just use SQL Server. Yeah. So I don't know how to start, and then
can we migrate from SQL
yes.
Server to Neo4j?
So data synchronization.
Yeah, that's always definitely a good question. So yeah, sometimes people will take Neo4j and use it as like sort of like, okay, we have this data here that's like recommendations or social or whatever, and we will just take that and put it over here in Neo4j. And that might be just like, we store the data, the what's the term? The primary data is, in SQL, for example, and you just send it off to Neo4j. You maybe wipe out Neo4j and then just rebuild it or whatever. So you can do that, or you could say, okay, well, I'm going to migrate this data from SQL, this part of my database, from SQL into Neo4j, and then every time I want to do a social network query, I can do it over here. And but as far as like migrations, like I don't know specifically. So yeah, I mean it's kind of like engineering. Like it depends on the application. You sort of have to like sort of work on it. And every sort of, I feel like every synchronization I've ever done between two databases where I was migrating or doing something was always kind of something you had to do custom. I mean, there's Neo4j, Neo4 APIs, active record. So this is a gem that I wrote, and it's actually, I'm not entirely happy with how it works, but it's pretty good. Where if you have an SQL database, it will try to figure out your database's structure and import things into Neo4j. So certainly with a shot, if you have a database, you can run this. If you have an existing like Ruby application that's using active record, using Rails, or not even using Rails, but as long as it's using active record, and you have models set up in active record, that's even better for this gem because it'll be able to figure things out that much more easily, and then it'll use that to import the data into Neo4j. But it doesn't need active record. It can use any SQL database that active record supports, like MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, maybe Oracle, and so that's one thing. This is one option. There's a Neo4j connector. So if you happen to be using MongoDB, there is a, where is this? Neo4j doc manager, which this takes advantage of the fact that MongoDB has built into it this sort of functionality for adding connectors to other databases, and so this will, whenever MongoDB updates, it'll move the changes over automatically to Neo4j. So that's one thing if you happen to be using Mongo. But there's also Monsanto database migration. This actually might not be as generic as I would hope, but Neo4j, Monsanto, GitHub, Monsanto Go, Monsanto question, Monsanto so what was it? They had some tool, and they mentioned it, they gave a talk at Graph Connect, which is a conference that Neo Technology puts on. That they built this tool that they use to import their data from their SQL database to Neo4j, and I think it's even like a generic thing. Like I don't think it's necessarily specific to SQL and Neo4j. What I would do, I think it's in here somewhere, and I'm just not recognizing the name of it, but Monsanto Graph Connect video. Yeah, graphs are feeding the world. So this is the talk, and somewhere in here he mentions this tool that they built, and I wish I knew what it was exactly. Maybe they have a link to it. No. Yeah, it's somewhere on their GitHub repository that it's an ETL tool that they built that they use to keep their database, because they can't get rid of their SQL database because other people in the company use it and they have legacy applications. But they do have this Golden Gate. That sounds like it. An adapter for Oracle Golden Gate push change capture data directly to Apache Kafka cluster. I think it was Golden Gate was what it was called. And so yeah, they're, I think this is something that they built. I don't know if you need to build something yourself, but there's some solutions out there. Nothing perfect, but it's not an easy problem. So that's also part of it.
Yeah.
There are two versions of Neo4j. Is Neo4j for community and Neo4j Enterprise. So when should I use Neo4j Enterprise?
Right. So Neo4j Enterprise. So there's a few features that it offers. If you go to the additions page, you can sort of see. One of the things that I didn't actually know about the license until not that long ago is that I'm pretty sure that you can use the community edition of Neo4j as long as your application isn't exposed to the public. So if you have a website that's exposed to the public and you're using Neo4j, then you should be using Enterprise according to the licenses. But if you have like an internal project, you can use community. And it's there for production use. You can use it in a production environment, and people do use the community edition for production uses. But in enterprise, it provides some things that make it a little bit nicer to use, especially if you're a larger company. So they have there's like enterprise lock manager, cache sharing, cluster replication. So these like some of these things are just like performance improvements that you can get with the enterprise edition. That when you're operating at a really large scale, that they can help you operate faster and at that larger scale. You get cluster replication, which is like you have a master and then it replicates to slaves, and that allows for faster read performance for reading from those different slaves. The one thing I caution you if you do have a cluster is if you write to the slave, it's going to write to the master first, and then it's going to propagate out again. So it's generally good if you could just configure your application so it always writes to the slave any updates or sets or deletes that you do. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm not as familiar with Cypher query tracing. Probably exists. I didn't realize that was an enterprise thing. I thought they were in this enterprise. So this is a constraint that you say, this property must exist. There's also built into the community and enterprise, you can have a uniqueness constraint, which is basically this property on this label must be unique. If you have an identifier or a national identifier number or whatever, you'd often put a constraint on it just to make sure that it's not repeated. And then, advanced monitoring. You were asking about that before. So this is like, no, I know a lot of these things, but like I didn't associate that. So that's something I would look into, but I don't know too much about it. And then hot backups is actually the one thing that a lot of people look for, is the ability to, while your database is running, make a backup either continuously or incrementally. But with community, if you want to make a backup, essentially you have to shut down your database, copy the database folder away, and then start your database up again, which is sometimes inconvenient, sometimes it's not so bad, but yeah. So those are reasons why you might use enterprise. Anything else? I also had some questions. You sent along some questions from someone on Meetup. I can answer some of those too.
Yes. I've sent to you.
Yeah, thank you. On Meetup. No, I think we've covered some of the questions, but we can look to see if there's anything that we might cover. Some of the questions I wasn't exactly sure how to answer because it's kind of depends on the situation, but how to increase the Neo4j query performance with some special cases, limitation of sample query. Oh, so I think actually I don't know if I understood this question, but I think I understand it now, that like if you want to increase your performance where Cypher can't address it, I think unmanaged extensions or using Java directly can often be the solution for that. So I think that's the answer to this. Is this someone here? Was there questions, or is this multiple questions from multiple people? Or where did these questions come from?
From the register form.
Okay, awesome.
Câu này ở đây có bạn nào hỏi câu này thì có thể diễn giải thêm không?
Cái câu này mình lấy từ trong cái ký các bạn có câu hỏi trong diễn giải.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was answering the question. I just wanted to make sure I was answering it to someone's satisfaction. So this was asking about, this is sort of what reminded me of it, that is it safe to use Community Edition in production? And yes, Community is made to be able to use it in production. It's not a problem, it's just maybe not as performant in certain circumstances at large scale. So this one is, I've used Neo4j, some small project to store data that I crawl from some website. I have some problem about performance when I start to restructure large data to import into Neo4j, so I decided to switch to another graph database. Should I or shouldn't I use Neo4j and semantic web for technology about data such as linked open data RDF instead of some NoSQL support scale out with Gremlin and Magic Tinkerbot? So I'm actually not, unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with like Titan and these some other graph databases. I've just been spending so much time with Neo4j, but I would say that Neo4j is fine. I mean, I don't know what the problem here was, and so I don't know that I can answer the question. But as far as I know, it's a great use case for graph databases to have, Neo4j or other graph databases to have these sort of semantic web and social networking. But sometimes it could be that whoever asked this question maybe was having problems, but maybe they needed an index or there was something. The other thing actually I'll mention just as a general tip is if you put profile or explain at the beginning of your query, then it will help you debug your queries and why they might be slow. So if I put a profile in here, it gives a nice little breakdown of where time is being spent in the execution of the query, which is nice. And actually, sometimes it ends up being like a reverse tree. Sometimes where you have to gather some data, and then bring it together, and then gather some other data and bring it together. So this can be pretty handy. And this will tell you because I did a profile, this is actually telling me how the query actually ran. If you do an explain, it won't actually run the query, it'll just tell you what it thinks is going to happen. But here you can see there are 76 database hits, 11 database hits. So these are the, like, as I was saying, you're going into the file structure and getting these individual objects out of the file. But that's what I would suggest to whoever asks this question about how you might, move forward. And there's resources online. If you ask, there's a lot of people who are happy to answer questions about these sorts of things on Slack and Stack Overflow. Demos and best practices for social network system with Neo4j. So we kind of talked about some of that. I can show, I don't know about best practices, but we can say like match person, friend of, give you an example of how this might work. Friend of person. We might even say, one of the actually nice features I didn't really cover is you can say, give me another person who's a friend of in 2 or 3 hops away from this person. And so friend of friend, and then you could say like return friend of friend name count asterisk, and that would give you basically like how many paths take me from this person to this other person. And so that's one way you can do a social networking example, and maybe that's not detailed enough. And it's kind of an open question. Yeah, and I'm sure there's more I can get into. At a large scale, should we use Neo4j alone or Neo4j in memory caching layer like Redis for best performance? Again, I think this sort of depends on your use case. I think Neo4j is similar to other databases where sometimes it makes sense to cache some stuff, especially if you have computations. I think it can make sense to store in Redis, but it really depends, because you could if you throw a bunch of memory at Neo4j, then you could do very fast queries on your data. And you still might have to tweak the performance, but it depends on your use case. I have to say about that. At a further stage of my project, we will have to apply data mining techniques that produce. Do you have any advice for that? I actually kind of do. What is it? Neo4j. Produce. So you guys see any DBpedia? So this guy who used to be a developer advocate for Neo4j has a tool. This wasn't it. Well, maybe I can post this on the Meetup group. But he made a tool to process Neo4j data using MapReduce. I think it was like the Amazon MapReduce solution. I forget what it's called. But he basically was processing Wikipedia, and there's this. Or maybe it was DBpedia. There's an online database that's like in a data structure that's easy to import, and so he imported that into Neo4j, and then was doing analytics with the Google PageRank algorithm, which is basically saying, it's looking for like triangles of which I'm really fuzzy on this because I haven't read the article in a long time, but basically for each of these, he's trying to find a score for how much a particular thing is linked to from other things, and using MapReduce to do that very, very quickly. in a cluster of cloud nodes. I'll find the article and I'll post it because I can't seem to find it right now. But anyway, are there any other questions? That was all kind of vague, but I wanted to make sure I got to those questions. Cool. Anyway, feel free to email me. I'll post the slides, and so you can contact me on Meetup, email me, tweet, whatever. I'm also on Gitter, like I mentioned. But there's also I'll post a link to the public Neo4j Slack channel, which is great. There's a lot of places where you can get help on different languages like Ruby and .NET, but also enterprise and community and getting started with Neo4j and all these different things. So.
I have Neo4j has any concept like view or anything else like store procedure?
So you mentioned views, right? So the first thing
yes.
you said. I don't think there's anything like a view in Neo4j. Stored procedures are not there, but I'm pretty sure they're going to be there in 3.0, which is going to be released hopefully. I'm hoping it's going to be in the first half of this year, probably the second quarter. And that should have stored procedures in it that you can access through Cypher, and so you should be able to do computations. I think they'd probably be written in Java, although actually I think they were trying to make it so these stored procedures could be written in like JavaScript. I have to look at that again, but it's definitely something they're putting in, but it doesn't exist right now, stored procedures.
So everything Cypher query we have to be view into the source code.
Into the what?
My mean is Neo4j don't have any place to store view or anything else. So we have to view every query cipher into the source code, right?
Into the so you have to query everything sort of live. I think I missed what you're saying. There is a functionality where in Neo4j, if you make the same query multiple times, it will cache it won't cache the result, but it will cache the query plan. And there's another thing that I should mention. If you're making a query in Neo4j, let me actually open this in Vim, because this isn't something you could do in the web console. But if you have say match person wrote post, something very simple, and you wanted to say where p.name equals something, you would use parameters, which is you do like something like this: person name, return post to that title. Oh, there's two pieces that you have now. Work post. So here, this is a parameter in Cypher, and so what you would do is, if you're using like Ruby, for example, you would say query equals that, and then session.query person name, right? That. And so what this does is this string always stays the same even if the person name changes, and so it can cache that query plan. And so that's one thing. And also in 3.0, I think they're actually working to make it so that it compiles I don't know the exact details of this, but they're hoping to compile the execution plans into bytecode so that they're very, very quick. They can be cached and then just execute very, very quickly. But this is also really handy for security too. If this value is coming from a user that you don't necessarily trust, you won't have any injection attacks if you use parameters. So that's pretty handy because you don't have to deal with escaping of values that you're passing into an SQL string, like into a query string like you do with SQL.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if that answered your question or not. Is that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know I don't. Essentially, you're executing set queries every time. I think it'll also be a little bit faster when the Bolt protocol comes along because it'll be a socket-based binary protocol. So you'll constantly have a connection open, so you won't have to open up a new connection like you do with HTTP and JSON. It'll just communicate directly. So hopefully it'll be decently faster.
Ngoài còn câu hỏi gì không? Anh có câu hỏi gì không?
Đây chắc phải mình thêm nữa.
Mình hỏi. Hỏi xem là cái lúc đấy Tùng hỏi về UK đúng không? Khi nào Tùng nói? Thì đấy đúng không? Có mạng xã hội với cả cái hệ thống kiểu như là thương mại điện tử đúng không?
Cái hệ thống mà gợi ý
Recommendation system.
So what kind of trade-off should we consider for using this?
Right. So I think some of the things we talked about, there's the ability to do some of the more complex searches like you might in SQL or even in like Mongo is not quite there yet in Neo4j, but you can sort of get around this sometimes with Elasticsearch. It's a Java thing, and so it's going to require some more memory, and oftentimes you'll want to configure the memory appropriately so that the Java heap has space to store the database. And sometimes that's like, depending on how much data you have, that might be gigabytes of space. So that's one thing to consider. Probably also just like the type of data that you have, like data that's really particularly suited for Neo4j, I think, is entities, that you're representing something from real life. Especially that's very nice to model, and it often works very well in browsing and going through your data. If it's one thing that I've sort of played with in Neo4j is like if you have like financial data or just like counts of like the number of people that went through a train station or whatever, like that you can store it in Neo4j, like the aggregated data. Like if you're storing like a node of like person came into the station and then left at this other station, or train station or whatever, that's a little more entity-like. But if it's like aggregated data, you can store it in Neo4j, and there's not necessarily a problem with it. It's just not as interesting, maybe. So that's one thing to consider too.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like what kind of like so basically Neo4j is better in performance. I just want to know, like, in some cases, in what kind of cases Neo4j has worse performance than.
Yeah. So I think kind of like what I said before, where if you have lots of just event data that's just constantly logging, there's definitely things that are better for that, like HBase. Even Postgres can often be nice for that if you tune it a little bit. And a lot of times you might want to take that data and then like, pull it out and make it into a graph structure. The other thing that I've run into is, so you can often do things at a large scale. I think querying lots and lots of data is not, I think, going to be quite as efficient. I don't think it's necessarily too bad, but it's not going to be as efficient as like SQL. And especially, like, one thing I've hit is if you want to do like pagination of like millions of records, that's something that like essentially it's going to pull all of the records, all of the nodes for that label, for example, and then sort them in memory and then give you the first page. And I think that's something they want to improve later, but it's not great right now. So yeah, but it's particularly well suited for like if you know that you're going to be, you might have lots and lots and lots of data, but you're only going to be going to a particular place in the graph and exploring the local network. That's like the top case. So yeah, thank you.
Do you think Neo4j can solve all problem with
Can it solve all the problems that you can do with SQL? Yeah, probably. I mean, you know, anything, you can do anything with enough engineers, right? I'm not saying that like it's necessarily difficult. I'm just saying that like, you know, is it going to be about the same amount of effort? Is it going to be a lot more difficult? Yeah, I mean, I'd say that, you know, if you you know, understand, it takes you know, like I was saying before, it takes a little time to get used to sort of the graph database concepts and how to use it. I think once you do that, yeah, I think you can do just about anything with some of the trade-offs I was talking about before. So, and
I have read in Neo4j guide for bot data and ETL. The guide is for migrate non-win database to Neo4j. Do you have any benchmark between SQL and Neo4j?
So I don't have. So there's the things like you say it's like what are tools to import from SQL to Neo4j, you said, or
in the here you can see some CV to
CSV, right?
Okay, you cipher to load to.
Right, totally. Let me actually, I'll sort of show that on the slide. So that's good that you mentioned Neo4j load CSV. So there's a command in Cypher called load CSV, which will take a either a file or a URL for a CSV file, and it will import that as like one line at a time, and then you can execute Cypher statements on each line to say, you know, okay, now import a row, maybe import multiple rows based on the structure, you know, the columns that are in the CSV. And there's a command that you often use with load CSV that's the merge command, which is like an upsert or a find or create, which is basically like if it exists, then return that object